Oh, hi! Didn't see you there. Today, we're going to talk about different music education methodologies. Today, we'll be learning about 5 different music education methodologies: Dalcroze, Kodály, Orff, Gordon, and World Music Pedagogy.
Who's Dalcroze?
Emil Dalcroze was born in 1865 in Vienna. He was professor of solfège, composition, and harmony at the Geneva Conservatory, and he believed in eurythmics.
What's eurythmics?
According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, eurythmics is defined as the art of harmonious bodily movement, especially through expressive timed movements in response to improvised music. Here's an example of an activity with a great song.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? I travel the world and the 7 seas. Everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to get used by you.
Dalcroze believed that students needed to be able to internalize the music through structured movement activities. He also believed that if students weren't able to do this, they would really struggle with playing it and singing. Dalcroze also used solfège and improvisation with eurythmics. He believed that improvised music was the best practice for ear training.
What's improvisation?
Improvisation is defined as created and performed spontaneously or without preparation. Now that we know the definition of improvised, let's watch an example of an improvised solfège game. Do, mi, sol, mi, do, ti, do. Do, sol, mi, ti, do. Mi, 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 do, do, ti, do. Dalcroze wanted students to imagine their bodies as the instruments, so they could feel the sensation of moving through space with music. This helps students become more spatially aware and gives them the opportunity to move freely to music. Students may be given examples of how to move, but are always encouraged to use their creativity and show movement through music. In classrooms today, teachers that use the Dalcroze method use recording selections to highlight a concept. Once their students master this concept and are able to recognize it on their own, they're able to recognize it in multiple other recordings. When teachers are using improvised music, they vary between gradual and sudden changes from listening to listening. This keeps the student's attention and also shortens their response time from their head, their ear, and their body. Various rhythmic concepts are studied through games. Many musical concepts can be explored with Dalcroze, such as melody and tempo. This method tends to use fixed do, and must always provide opportunities for students to enjoy music through listening, express ideas and feelings in singing and movement. They must also become familiar with examples of music from various times, places, and people. Like many other music methodologies, Dalcroze's main goal was music literacy. Next, we'll talk about Kodály. He was born in 1882 in Hungary.
Hungry? Is it lunchtime?
Close. Hungary the country. Like Dalcroze, he desired to make a musically literate society. Go.
Could I do that?
Yes. This methodology is characterized by the use of singing for primary music participation, specifically using folk music in the mother tongue. The goal is to instill musicianship for all children. Kodály and composer Bartók wanted to preserve Hungarian culture. They believe that music is essential to human development, and music teaching should begin with singing. Unlike Dalcroze, Kodály used movable do. Kodály believed that singing is the route to musical literacy. Kodály inclined teachers prepare students for musical concepts by having them make music with that concept in place. After this, the students are then presented with that concept. Teachers must identify with the concept students are to learn after they are presented with it. Students reinforce this concept using multiple methods such as reading, writing, and improvisation. In this method, students could learn by rote with visual aids for support.
She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes.
Our next method is the Orff method.
This guy?
Yes, Karl Orff, born in 1895 in Germany. His teaching process includes singing, movement, playing, instruments, creating, and improvising, much like our other theorists. This is more of an approach rather than a methodology. He began the Gunther School for Gymnastics, Music, and Dance in Munich. Orff believed that elemental music with drones and ostinatos should be taught alongside with movement and speech, similar to our next theorist, Gordon, but we'll talk about him later. Orff believed that learning is an active process, and play is most important. The goal is to help students be comfortable with active music making. They can
Sing, move,
play instruments,
use speech in rhythmic
and dramatic contexts.
improvise simply in all of these areas, and combine materials into an original format. The Orff teaching approach includes instruments such as xylophones, glockenspiels, marimbas, and metallophones. Instruments are put into 3 categories: barred, unpitched, and recorders. All materials used should be simple, basic, and close to a child's world of thought and fantasy. In this teaching approach, students begin by exploring. They discover their sound and movement possibilities. Students then move on to imitation. This is where they develop basic skills in rhythmic speech and body percussion, such as tapping, snapping, patting, and stomping. They do this rhythmically, in free movement, in singing, and in playing instruments. After this, students move on to improvisation. Now, where have we heard that before?
Dalcroze and Kodai.
That's right! Dalcroze and Kodai. In this step, students expand their skills that they've been working on. The last step in the teaching process is creation. In this step, students combine materials from any and all phases of their learning to, well, create. Our next theorist is Gordon.
You like Gordon?
I do. Edwin Gordon was born in 1927. He's an American music educator, and he began the music learning theory, the theory that children learn music in a similar way to how they learn language, similar to what Orff believed. Unlike Orff, this was the main basis of Gordon's theory. He believed that children first need to learn how to listen to music. They can then move to speaking and thinking vocabulary. After this, they learn how to read music and finally how to write music. Children must sing and chant in tonal and rhythmic patterns. They also must be provided with a rich musical environment before singing. Gordon's beat function system is not based on counting, but based on rhythmic function, how you feel the beat. Another key component in this theory is audiation.
What's that?
Audiation is hearing and comprehending music when the sound is absent. Audiation requires music comprehension, not memorization. Something else unique to this theory is the concept of musical aptitude. What? Gordon believed that one's musical ability develops up until age 9 and stops soon after. This is widely debated in the music education community. Part of the teaching process is the whole part whole process. This is where you first teach your students the song in its totality, then you break it down, and then you put it all back together. Another part of this theory is the skill learning sequence. This includes discrimination learning and inference learning. This takes place when students know they're being taught but don't know what they're learning yet. Inference learning does not include rote teaching. In inference learning, students make their own discoveries. Using inference learning, students are able to create and improvise their own music, as long as they have something to create and improvise with. Similar to Dalcroze, Gordon uses movement to teach and reinforce style, musical concepts, and rhythmic accuracy.
I want to learn how to do this.
You can, through world music pedagogy. What is world music pedagogy, you might ask? Well, I'll tell ya. World music pedagogy is a label given to a teaching process by Patricia Sheehan Campbell. She's an ethnomusicologist and a music educator at the University of Washington, Seattle. While this teaching approach emerged in the 1960s, Campbell developed it in the early 2000s into what it is today. But what is it? I'm glad you asked. One of its main goals is to diversify and globalize today's students. WMP's main goals include expanding perspectives and a deeper understanding of people and cultures by an active listening process. There are 5 main elements to this approach. We'll start with attentive listening. This kind of listening is very focused and takes a closer look at different musical elements and structures using specific points of reference in the music. Next is engaged listening. This is where listeners are actively engaged in music making. Next is inactive listening. This is where students take what they learn and recreate it in the most accurate way possible. This is different than creating world music, which is up next. Creating world music is where students take what they've learned and make their own music. And finally, we have integrating world music. This is where we decide where music from other cultures connect with our own. We can discover this through different subjects such as history, language, literature, geology, and science. Teachers who use world music pedagogy often link things from other cultures with that of their students. Let's take this to the streets and ask the people, do you like music?
No.
Yes. Excuse me? Excuse me?
Please leave me alone.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you like music?
Amy, I'm working.
I believe that at some point in my career I will utilize all 5 of these methods and approaches, but I think the ones that I see myself using the most are Orff and Dalcroze. I don't know very much about world music pedagogy, and I enjoy Kodai's methodology. Is just not something that I see myself using as much as I would Orff or Dalcroze. Movement is a really big component for what I think that, for my personal teaching philosophy, I think that students need to be engaged with everything that they're doing, and for some students that includes movement, and that I found mostly in Orff and Dalcroze. And with Orff, students are seeing the music that they're making. When you're singing, I am biased towards singing, but when you're singing, you can't see it, you can only feel it. But when you're with an instrument, with a recorder, with an Orff instrument, it's so much easier for you to visually connect with that way of music making. I'm very intrigued by Gordon's theory. Obviously, audiation is something that we've all heard and we all use. The musical aptitude is something that I am not too sure of. I have my own opinions, as I'm sure everyone does. The whole part whole obviously works. I think that with all of the similarities between all 5 of these methods, it's easy to just interchange between all 5 of them, but for me, I think Orff and Dalcroze are the most similar, just with the movements and using solfege to improvise, and I believe these two are the closest. No, they're not. They're not the closest. They're just the most closely compatible to what my personal teaching philosophy is. But like I said, they all have so many similarities to each other that I would probably be using one and think that it's the other one. The only one that I don't really get that with is world music pedagogy in its own right. It's very unique because it's the newest, and its aim is to diversify classrooms, which is something that I'm passionate about. It's just not something that I am super familiar with, so I would need to do a lot more research, but obviously I would love to add more world music into my classroom rather than with Kodai using just folk songs from America. And I think that those two have a lot of similarities in their own right, just because of the music that you're learning. It might not be the same way you're learning it, but if the goal for Kodai is to preserve culture, why can't you also bring in another culture and teach it in a way that your students actually can grasp what is happening in different cultures and realize that they're not that far separated from someone that's across the world. Yeah. Thanks for watching!